about 80% are expecting both membership and revenue to grow by more than 5%. They're expecting a strong year, despite some of the economic headwinds. So we can be optimistic because, our IHRSA members and the industry overall, they're pretty optimistic about the long-term growth of the industry.
This is All Things Fitness and Wellness, hosted by Chrissy Van. Together, we're uniting industry thought leaders and fitfluencers on the mission to inspire innovation and encourage people to live a life fit and well. Brought to you by Fitness World. Your fitness, your way. Visit fitnessworld.ca. The fitness industry is going through a transformative shift. Gyms have long been seen as a destination for shredded abs and dropping lbs. However, this narrative is one that truly misses the mark over what movement is all about. When you look at North America, we have a mental health crisis, obesity epidemic, and significant challenges in our healthcare systems. All elements that could see some remedy if the physical inactivity crisis was addressed. Within the industry, the message has been shifting to one that highlights that health clubs are destinations for preventative healthcare. This is the same industry that was hit tremendously hard during the pandemic and not seen as essential. So what is the state of the fitness industry now? On today's episode, we chat with CEO and President of IHRSA, Liz Clark, and Melissa Rodriguez, who is the Market Research Advisor to IHRSA. They're joining All Things Fitness and Wellness to share highlights and commentary from this year's 2023 IHRSA Global Report, which includes insights from 15 federations. We'll discuss emerging trends, economic impact, and the trajectory of where the industry is headed. Before we get to it, be sure to hit like and subscribe. We have new podcast episodes weekly featuring industry thought leaders and influencers. Plus, we're continuing our gym and wellness haven tours with inspiring founder stories. I'm your host, Chrissy Van, and this is ATFW. But IHRSA Global Report, obviously this isn't the first rodeo of one of these. Everyone in the fitness industry is familiar, but I would think now more than ever, the data and information that we're getting could not be more important, considering we know what a tumultuous time the industry had to go through when we saw all the shutdowns courtesy of the pandemic. So first of all, what are some of the key highlights that were really stand out of this year's report?
Yeah, Chrissy. So I would kick sort of the metrics over to Melissa, but I'll just say that one of the things that I think that we're most thrilled about with this report are so many of the people that came to support it with the different knowledge and perspective from around the world. This report this year is one like we've never released before. So everything that we have in there is going to help operators, investors, employees, and really just brings a different world perspective that's going to be really digestible. And we're just really thrilled about that format and that we're going to be able to deliver it that way this year.
How about yourself, Melissa? What's kind of the standouts there?
Yeah, I think it was kind of exciting after a couple of years of contending with the fallout from the pandemic and then the economic uncertainty. There's like a lot of generosity from clubs participating in the survey and contributing data. And it was really encouraging to see that there's been kind of good year over year growth between 2021 to 2022 with membership. Like on average, the top 25 clubs grew membership by 15% over that year, and that's it's like very encouraging number to see coming out of COVID, and even footprint. As far as footprint, we saw some of the leaders also growing the number of locations across the globe, and it really it's a testament to the globalization of this industry and how fitness is top of mind for a lot of consumers around the world, and in both developed and developing and emerging markets.
And Liz, when you're hearing that, how does it feel, especially because I know you work so closely with industry members?
Yeah, listen, it feels great. And for when I came into this industry 2 years ago, we were at the very bottom, and we've been clawing ourselves out. And so that's great to see the news that industry is on the rise again. Part of that is because we're a hardworking industry and we figured out solutions to deliver vehicles for people to have fitness even in the toughest of times. So a big credit to our industry for figuring that out, but we're on the rise again. We're seeing more and more interest. And I think that one thing that we know that came out of the pandemic was an awareness to move your body and to go outside. So we're seeing, close to 30% of people that are actually having memberships in multiple locations. So I think folks are figuring out that they want a different experience. And the fact that our industry is able to provide so many different experiences, I think is a great thing.
Yeah, Melissa, what was some of the data in regards to that optimism moving forward? Because we are seeing, obviously, as you say, that trend where people are returning to in-gym spaces. As a gym user, social wise, you can feel the buzz every time you're walking into a facility. People are happy to be back there. But when it comes to some of the insights, what was yielded there?
Yeah, so club operators, they're optimistic too. So it's not just the kind of demand from the consumers, but the club operators in our survey really are optimistic about this year relative to last year. So about 80% are expecting both membership and revenue to grow by more than 5%. They're expecting a strong year, despite some of the economic headwinds. So we can be optimistic because, our IHRSA members and the industry overall, they're pretty optimistic about the long-term growth of the industry.
Were there any particular leaders in that resurgence, especially when we look at the type of health club operators? Were there certain standouts there?
Yeah, so I think, we're early on in the recovery. I know there was kind of some buzz around some of the lower cost, lower price clubs kind of coming out strong. And now, but what we're seeing is kind of across the board where, the lower price clubs, the clubs that have multiple portfolios of brands, whether it's lower price, mid-priced, and also, within the studios, they're growing and they're showing that that's a promising outlook to the industry. So not to single out specific ones, but I think it's kind of been pretty good across the board for the industry leaders. I know there are some struggles with small businesses, and we'll probably talk about that a little bit more later, but we're seeing kind of really good growth with some of the leaders leading clubs across various segments.
Yeah, and Melissa, if I can just jump on top of that, because I think we're seeing a resurgence of sort of tried and true fitness. So clubs that have embraced free weights, clubs that are offering classes like bar and yoga, all of those are absolutely on the upswing, as well as those that have figured out embracing technology and leveraging an app format. So kind of to be able to, because some folks do still want to work out at home and then some want to go in but many want a hybrid. And so we're seeing that as a success from the companies that have been able to leverage the technology platforms that exist.
Yeah, I was just going to ask there what some of those key strategies were that you were hearing. And I think for certain, obviously, we knew in the beginning that everyone was a little bit fearful of what that virtual transition would look like. But even I just had a conversation with Al Nashivarni, who was highlighting exactly that. It's like, you're actually able to connect with your members more and keep that social component and that connection and the follow-ups and the check-ins all through your app. You're keeping it in one land. And to be honest, I think it's just encouraging people more and more to walk through those doors. But we did kind of allude there, smaller businesses. My mind immediately goes to boutique, which again, I think we've really been focusing on bringing everyone under this one umbrella. We're all one industry working toward the same goal. But I know here, I'm based in Vancouver, BC. We saw a lot of closures in that sector, a lot of single owner businesses trying to make strides. So what were some of the findings when it came to the boutique sector of the industry? How are they faring?
So I'll just start and then kick it over to just Melissa, because sort of on a whole level, right? I think this is true from both large and small boutiques, that those that have figured out how to leverage their point of sale systems that are more sophisticated than they ever were before, I think have found a little bit more success and been able to drive more social engagement into what they're doing, which then just continues to build and build and build. I think that that's true for both boutiques and the large, but I'll let Melissa answer that.
Yeah, so with boutiques, I mean, they were the hardest hit, as far as closures. And you'd mentioned there in Canada and in BC that there are a lot of closures. In the US, about 30% of boutique studios closed, just because of the pandemic. It was especially hard for them with the social distancing guidelines, and then being smaller businesses too. It was really a struggle. And then based on our consumer research, we're seeing that the membership levels were still down 37% in 2021 relative to pre-COVID. And we'll have more data coming up in a forthcoming consumer report. But it's when you see closure rates and membership drops like that, it takes some time recover. And they are doing their best, but it's a lot harder on smaller businesses, both kind of the pandemic and some of the economic hurdles that they're facing.
Well, and when we were kind of speaking there as a whole in regards to the optimism that is in the industry because people are returning, what are kind of some of the overarching challenges that we're facing still at this time?
Listen, I think that those are the same challenges that businesses across the U.S. and the world are facing. Rising interest rates, confidence in the economy, elections, wars. I mean, all those things that impact business are absolutely hitting our sector as well.
Yeah, so I think the economy, it's kind of stalling the recovery, as if the pandemic fallout wasn't challenging enough, and that's something we do get into depth in that global report. But those rising interest rates, fluctuating interest rates, and inflation, it's kind of delayed openings for a lot of the kind of maybe smaller mid-sized chain clubs that are looking to expand, because the cost of capital, the cost of financing. If you can find it, then it's going to be expensive. So, and it's already cutting into your bottom line, having high inflation for that's impacting some of the clubs. So it's a combination of all that's kind of delaying openings for some, and then just kind of getting back to profitability has become a challenge for a lot of the smaller businesses and independents.
The other part too that continues, right, is the tight labor market. And, and our industry is such a labor intensive market. And so I think that's a real concern that our members are finding creative solutions there. But it's a real concern that prevails.
Yeah, fair enough. And I mean, obviously, there's so many conversations around AI and tech that could alleviate some of those challenges. But at the same time, implementing some of those strategies also costs money. So if there's one thing I know, the fitness industry is one that's made out of a hardy bunch that will persevere. And there are some exciting things happening in regards to the industry when it comes to emerging trends. So what are some of these that may be advantageous for health club operators to jump on in regards to seeing more growth?
Well, you just said AI. That's certainly an emerging trend that's going on, again, across the world. And for those that are leveraging AI in a smart way, they're able to really personalize folks' experience, which has really been exciting, as well as not only keeping people engaged in your business, but also to recruit new folks and to use that essentially as your labor. And so I think that we are just getting started as emerging on AI, and more to come there. Other trends, I'll turn that over to Melissa.
Yeah, so I think one of the things that we kind of have been seeing too that bodes well for in-person fitness is the normalization of the at-home fitness and online fitness. I think some of the return to office requirements by employers probably bodes well for the industry. Although, it's about, in the US at major metros, it's about 50% the office occupancy relative to pre-COVID. So it's still not back fully, but it just kind of points to the need, like Liz had pointed out, personalizing workouts, making sure that fitness and wellness is top of mind for your members, whether they're at your club or if they're at home. And I think that, in the long term with this hybrid work, as it plays out, it could be a win-win for both, home and in person, for kind of like a hybrid fitness arrangement. And then another thing is just kind of the shift in consumers from kind of pre-COVID. Maybe it was working out was like an incentive to weight loss, or as a goal for weight loss and to look good. Now it's about feeling good. It's more balance and mental health and longevity. So those are kind of giving rise to other trends like recovery, traditional strength training. Like, people are really looking for a balanced approach to fitness, and historically it would be kind of the seniors that were looking for active aging, mobility, yoga, but we're seeing it across the board. Even kind of the youth, the younger generations, are looking for a balanced approach to fitness, and that's kind of encouraging to see for the long-term outlook of the industry.
Oh, I think it's one of the most exciting shifts in the space that we're seeing, because it's truly the recipe that does make a difference in people's lives. Would you say those trends are something, because obviously the IHRSA International, this is a global report. Is that something that is widespread in all the markets that you explored, or are there any areas that are kind of seeing that direction more than others?
Well, our report this year, that's really exciting. I mean, we've got input from close to 20 federation partners that have weighed in, and we're seeing really interesting results. I think we're seeing that the Middle East is exploding and a lot of opportunity there. And then we're seeing when you shift over to even a more policy heavily focused regulated industries like in the UK and Canada, we're seeing a lot of growth from regions like that, but for kind of different reasons, which is interesting.
What are some of those different reasons?
Well, from my perspective, I think it's about creating a policy platform and an agreement that's helpful to businesses. And so again, we've seen our leaders in UK and Canada do a great job creating relationships with their policymakers and really putting the fitness industry forward, is to say, right, that we are preventative healthcare and that we're not considered sport and leisure and fun. And so I think that a lot could be learned from those regions, and we're doing that here in the US. But to have the input that we did from around the world for this report and to see some of the variations there, and it almost reflects also as well as to what we saw here in the US between the blue states and the red states. And it even comes back to that as for who was able to recover faster. And it was, a lot of that became reliant on how strict your policies and regulations were. So that's my lens. Melissa might have a different lens, but that's the lens I see it through.
Yeah, no, there's kind of good data out there, even from kind of independent research firms. So Ipsos has a global tracker of more than 50 countries and sovereign territories around the world. And what they found is that across the world, 86% of consumers are driven to do more about their physical health and well-being. And I think, and it was strongest in the Middle East, part of that boom that Liz had highlighted, like it's strongest among Middle East countries, as well as Latin America and Asia. And these are a lot of countries where they have lower penetration rates, member penetration rates pre-COVID. So there's a lot of opportunity there. And we have a lot of kind of IHRSA members that have this large global reach and are expanding into those areas. So it's just it's exciting to see that it's a global phenomenon, seeing fitness as a vehicle for overall well-being, longevity, and mental health.
Yeah, I think that overarching message, as I say, is one of the most impactful shifts in the industry, because if you've been somebody that has had fitness part of your life, all of these things, but to now have the voice and the messaging that's coming from top down into the marketing, not only is this going to have a tremendous impact on the bottom line of health clubs, which is absolutely important, but it truly is something that makes a difference in people's lives. We touched on the economic impact currently, but when we're saying kind of this short-term future into long-term goals here economically, with the current climate, what's the overall sentiment and findings in that space right now? Because obviously there's a lot of challenges that we didn't necessarily expect out of the other side of this resurgence.
I think it's kind of, you could characterize it as probably cautious optimism, or the data that we were getting back from some of the clubs in response to their outlook for the rest of the remaining of the year. And, no one wants to hear the recession word, but some of the historic IHRSA data that we have when it comes to health club usage and health club membership and club growth over a recession is that, it's been resilient. The industry has been resilient. I think in the Great Recession in the US, there was some contraction of clubs, between 1% to 3%, but that's a bad picnic compared to COVID, right? That seems like it's kind of you could expect that in the market, but during that same time, membership was pretty resilient and held steady. So despite the economy, there's still consumers place a very high value on their health and wellness. And I think everyone has kind of cautious optimism and is hoping that, inflation rates, they're easing a little bit. So are interest rates, and it makes some kind of little bit of hope for the future this year and into the coming year as well.
One of the things that we also have learned in the past year is the commitment to your fitness club. And if you're looking at having disposable income, and we've seen that folks have even been willing to not go out to restaurants, to not travel for leisure, but they won't give up their club membership. So you look at sort of priorities in the space for those that are, very active. I think that's a pretty powerful statement.
Do you feel that there's any opportunities in the current economic climate? Like, would that be something where we may be seeing a little bit of consolidation in the industry?
I mean, I think there's always opportunity, right? And I think one of the things that we've known about this industry is how innovative we are and how collaborative we can be. We talked about sort of the confluence of app and in person and what that means. And I've just seen so many partnerships be developed in the last 2 years that have been maybe a little unconventional. So I think that there's a lot of opportunity there, and I think more to come.
Yeah, I think more and more people are like, how can we think out of the box? And especially having that pause, I think some of the most creative ideas have come on the other side of that. And there is more unity. You've all shared this collective experience roller coaster ride together. So I think at the end of the day, something like that generally draws people together. We talked a little bit about virtual fitness. I know there were so many fears, as I say in the beginning there, but we've seen some interesting things when it comes to what Peloton just went through or Lululemon's mirror. So what's the overall sentiment right now with some of these connected fitness competitors in regards to their impact on our brick and mortars?
So I think one word I would change there is I don't know that I would say competitor, I would say partner. I think that you look at what those offerings are, and at the end of the day, all we want is everybody to move their body and to get fit. And however you need to do it, find your way. But I think that there are unlikely partnerships, right? We're seeing Peloton coming into gyms more and more. We're seeing those mirrors coming in. We're seeing a lot of those offerings that were previously at home only functions brought into the brick and mortar. And so I think our members are seeing that as well. So I think they're welcoming these conversations and to say, what can we provide as a better offering to our member to come in and maybe it's not the exact same experience every day. And so, maybe one day they want to take a class and then one day they, want to get on the Peloton and one day they just want to walk on the treadmill. And so our clubs are offering creative solutions, I think, to what I think at one point might have been viewed as competitors, but are evolved into partners.
Oh, I like that. What are your thoughts on that, Melissa?
Yeah, it's an ecosystem, broad ecosystem now that consumers just have more options than ever before, and it's something that really saw over COVID too, is just the collaboration and partnership, and then coming out of COVID, like just understanding that there's just a broad ecosystem of choices that consumers have and that they demand, and it's really great to see kind of those partnerships among the connected fitness and app providers, and I think that's something that we're going to continue seeing kind of moving forward.
Yeah, it's definitely nicer for people to have the more variety, the better. Exactly as you say. However, people can discover movement, they'll fall in love with it. And at the end of the day, that gets more people in the doors. So I think that's a win for everybody. Speaking of wins, I know obviously there is so much taking place from the advocacy standpoint. I know you spoke here. I'm joining you from Canada. We have a pesky tax line where they can't seem to drop the IN in ineligible to eligible for our medical expenses and gym memberships. And the FICDN working very hard to bring that message to the forefront. IHRSA, I joined you on a fly-in in May. I know another one taking place at the end of October. But from a global perspective, what are some of the movements that we are seeing so that we can really hammer home that message that fitness is essential?
Yes. So listen, Chrissy, I'll say a couple of things to that. First is that next week I'm off to the OECD, who's having their annual meeting on health and movement in Paris, and to talk about what are we doing in that space and how are we ensuring that we are an inclusive environment for the entire universe. And so I think that's going to be a really interesting day of learnings and sharings next week. And then beyond that, next month, I head to the WHO, where we are meeting with other groups in the fitness space to talk with Fiona Bowl, who's the head of the WHO sector, and to talk about, again, how do we slide out of this sort of sport and leisure to essentialness. And so those are big conversations that are happening at the international level. And then, of course, here in the US, we continue to push. You mentioned the fly-in. We continue to push the FIT Act, and we're getting co-sponsors on that every day and having just really good conversations about being able to use your health savings accounts for gym memberships or youth sports. And the youth sport argument is a really good one, because we know that if kids aren't active by the time they're 13, then they're definitely on a path to obesity. So we need to get kids moving as young as possible. And if this legislation can help move them, then I think that that's a really important piece. There's some other legislative challenges going out there that don't necessarily address what you were asking. Challenges like click to cancel, mandates from other bodies. Happy to talk more about that, but I think that the opportunity for us to engage is really just getting started. We're having conversations with embassies across the country. We're really talking to our federation partners. So many that were participated in this report. That there are a lot of learnings. We've learned, in Romania, for example, what Romania has been able to do, to get a tax removed on our sector is really fantastic. And then what's going on with VAT and what that means. And the VAT tax is a hot issue. We're going to talk about that quite a bit when I'm in Portugal for our European Congress meeting. So many, many things happening in that space.
Are there any insights, Melissa, that kind of complement what Liz is saying there?
Yeah, I know that there's been a lot of kind of independent research on the impact of like physical inactivity on the economy and like the burden it is to the healthcare system. It's something we cover in the global report, but there was an WHO report late last year that's found that 500 million cases of hypertension, heart disease, and even non-communicable diseases like mild depression and anxiety, 500 million of those cases would be attributable to physical inactivity by 2030. And so like as Liz is pointing out, all these policy making efforts, how critical they are for the well-being of the global society in order to get everyone moving and feel those mood boosting benefits and heart health benefits of physical activity to support the healthcare system, which is kind of already burdened as it is, and just move for a better health, more healthy global community.
Well, yeah. And Melissa, another thing too is I'll just say we were just recently part of the Physical Activity Alliance Symposium, where we brought over 100 health professionals together to talk about physical activity and how it really changes your mood. And the findings that came out of that were, listen, exercise does 3 immediate things for you. Number 1, reduces your anxiety. Number 2, reduces blood pressure. And number 3, helps with sleep. So that was pretty phenomenal just to have those talking points. And I think for so many of us, that feels like a no-brainer. But I think the more we're all saying the same thing and reminding people that exercise can be a really important part of medicine here and a really important part of preventative care and taking the burden off, the insurance system of, we know in 10 years, it's going to be $3.5 trillion cost. And so we need to be investing in that now and in as many creative ways that we can.
Well, and those numbers that you say are staggering, but then it's funny when you list that top 3, if there's somebody sitting at home that had a survey of like the biggest things that are bothering them in their lives personally that they want to address, it would probably be struggling with anxiety. I know so many people are like, I have issues with blood pressure and I'm on this medication, this medication, this medication, and I can't sleep. So yep. It really is that no-brainer. And I think it's exactly as I say, that whole shift is what's been so refreshing as somebody that's been a huge supporter of the gym industry and the fitness industry for so long in regards to what it's done for me personally in my life. It's really nice to see the narratives change from that high level side. And I do think that message is coming down. I mean, you can tell from the youth that are coming up and their number one reason is mental health. And then I know that there was just a study that came out of the UK where now mental health actually surpassed physical shape over the reason why people work out. So I think that momentum is just continuing to build. Obviously, people that are familiar with IHRSA know about the work that is being done. But if there are people that are within the health club industry that aren't quite familiar with the way that they can participate, how can people best serve this message?
Yes. So if you're in the US, we're trying to, again, push the FIT Act. And we actually have a really great tangible thing that clubs can use. And it's a poster. It's a poster that you can put up in your club that has a QR code that your patrons can scan the QR code and it sends a letter to their member of Congress. And we just rolled this out in August. And I'll tell you, we had one club in the Chicago area that held this poster up and sent 3,000 letters to Congress. So, you know, let's think about the power of what our patrons can do if our clubs really want to, you know, take advantage of that. I think it's also really just about getting closer to IHRSA. So anywhere that you can participate in our events and get to know us and the team, and we can, you know, plug and play wherever folks are. So maybe that's, you know, at our upcoming show in Los Angeles, you know, March 6 to 8, maybe it's the European Congress, which, by the way, we're thinking about calling the Global Congress moving forward because we've got over 30 countries representing and coming to that Congress. Or even the fly-in that you mentioned, the fly-in that we've got coming up in October, and we got another one in May. So I would just encourage clubs to get to know us as a brand, and then we're happy to put everybody to work.
Well, and I know firsthand from witnessing it, you really help equip people if they're coming into the space and not really sure where to begin. You certainly don't let them sit in that. It is very guided through. There's resources available. And on top of that, your colleagues that are already participating are people that you can lean on. We've been giving a really high level of this report, but Melissa, if somebody hasn't yet clicked that download button, what are some of the key things that you would say for them that they will find when they go through that really are things that they should be paying attention to when it comes to the data?
Yeah, I think kind of Liz really touched on it really well earlier on. I think with the insights coming from kind of our federation partners and groups, and seeing that there's a lot of commonality among us, like globally, and some of the challenges and some of the successes. So there's, you know, reason for optimism for the industry. One, just kind of based on seeing all the positive trends coming from consumers, the economic research, the opportunities with collaborating with healthcare. That's something that we kind of bear out in the report. And secondly, though, there's still struggles with the smaller businesses and independence because of the fallout from the pandemic and economic challenges. It's and that's kind of like a global phenomenon that's affecting everything, you know, from staffing to rising interest rates, and I think those are one of the two kind of key overarching. And then lastly, and it's, you know, we do delve into a little bit some of the advocacy efforts that Liz kind of discussed briefly too. So I think some of those like are the major highlights, and it's, as we mentioned, like one of the more robust reports that we've had in years, and it really kind of is a testament to how the global impact that our industry has. And it's a must-have resource. It's always been a must-have resources for everyone, whether it's an investor, a club owner, a public firm. You know, we see this report cited very frequently in public firm filings. So it's just kind of your go-to resource if you're a global thinker.
Speaking of global, lots of people like to unite every year and see the familiar faces in the industry, learn from the latest and the greatest. You did touch on it, Liz, that IHRSA 2024 taking place in LA this year. Well, next year. Yeah. But what can people expect when they travel in for the event?
I think just even more excitement than years before. There has been such a regrowth and a rebirth and a energy in this industry that's really fantastic. So people are thrilled about LA. I think just the buzz and the energy around LA will be really fantastic. We've got some fantastic speakers lined up. We've got Mark Mastrov, who's the principal of New Evolution Fitness. He's sort of an industry icon. Mark's going to share some of his, you know, his learnings of all of the companies that he's been a part of, which is really great. We've got Will Gallardo locked in, who's the restaurateur and best-selling author of Unreasonable Hospitality. So we know that what we're trying to do that's different is to really go outside of the fitness industry for some of these other speakers, because we know that we could be learning a lot from the hospitality sector, the technology sector, the other retail sector. So we're really leaning on new creative voices in that space. So just between the education that's coming together, the energy, the registration's open, hotels are filling up, all the social stuff is getting on the calendar. We're looking at all of our international forums that happen, a Canadian forum, a Latin American forum, an Australian forum. So there's just been, interest from really around the world. So I can't wait to go to LA and to have everybody together.
Yeah, it's really, and it's nice, as I say, being on the other side of it. I think it's just united all the voices. There's so much idea sharing. And speaking of idea sharing, obviously the global report is available now. People need to go and read it to get all the nitty gritty information. But what would be a lasting message that you would want to say to them after they've read it? What would be the thing that you kind of want to leave them with?
I just think the future is bright. And so that would be my take, is that, come read the report, learn about what is happening with your colleagues around the world. And we're trending up.
Love it. How about you, Melissa?
Yeah, I think that's outlook is really positive for the industry. And as you kind of leaf through the report and you can look at, some of the key leaders towards the back in the company profiles. And if you're a club operator and you don't see yourself there, be sure to participate in the survey next year so that we can recognize you. So I think that's probably the lasting message as you get more engaged with IHRSA. Keep an eye out for those surveys.
I know it's so busy for both of you. I just greatly appreciate you carving out the time and space.
Anytime, Chrissy, happy to do it. And thank you to Melissa. And thank you, Melissa, for all your analysis and making this report such a rock star report.
Thank you, Liz, and thank you, Chrissy. Just excited about IHRSA and excited about this report. So thanks for the opportunity.
You've just listened to the All Things Fitness and Wellness podcast, hosted by Chrissy Van. This episode was brought to you by Fitness World, your fitness, your way. Be sure to hit like and subscribe. We have new podcast episodes weekly featuring industry insiders and influencers. Together, we're on a mission for everyone to live a life fit and well.